I don't want Warren. I want General Wright. He cannot have General Wright because he's not in a position. And Grant will tell General Sheridan, who is not a nice fellow, that if you don't like the way General Warren proceeds, you have my authority to relieve him. So now they're turning Warren's fate over, and Grant undoubtedly knows Sheridan's feelings better than any other man, because Sheridan had not had a good day this day. And Sheridan has now been given carte blanche to relieve Warren. Now, it's going to turn out Warren is doing what he should be doing on the first day of April, but in Sheridan's mind, Warren should not be doing what he's doing, handling his corps. He should be leading his corps like Sheridan would do. So Sheridan goes and mucks into it, leads the attack, Warren doing what he is. The Battle of Five Forks is over. It's a great victory. And as soon as the battle is over, Sheridan will dictate an order to General Warren, directing him to turn over his command to the senior senior division commander, again, Charles Griffin. And Warren gets the order, and he's dumbfounded. And then he'll ride to Sheridan, and Sheridan is mean. He's a Grant favorite, and he's going to probably use a lot more words than I say. But what is happening here is going to be played out on the first day of April 1865. And Warren will, when Sheridan shows up and asks him to consider, Sheridan will say, "Reconsider hell! I don't reconsider what I do. Report to General Grant." And we know good and well what General Grant is going to do when Warren reports to him, because in Grant's mind, sympathy is between suicide and syphilis, as it applies to
I think that's just all very unfair of General Warren. Now, he was in a difficult position this whole campaign, and he wasn't
he's in a very difficult position, and if you're in a difficult position, he's in the same position that poor General Lucas is at Edinburgh. And he is in a difficult position, and Lucas should have read the tea leaves, because he knew that Clark and the powers that be had relieved a United States Corps commander at Salerno for the same thing. You've got to realize that it can be unfair, but it's such it is in the chain of command.
You have to respect him then, because he didn't kiss their ass.
All right, yes, you can respect it, yes. And he will finally get exonerated. But he will not get a court of inquiry that will handle his case, and we got to leave after this, but because he will not get a court of inquiry to consider the Five Forks problem as long as Grant is President of the United States. Hayes, of course, has loyalty to the Army. Garfield is in too short a time to make any decision, and they finally get Arthur, who never commanded troops in the field as a soldier, and then Warren will finally get his hearing, but it's only over Five Forks. And Sheridan shows he has the same problem that is a good friend of in the Warren Court of Inquiry. He has the same problem that one of Bob Crick's heroes does, and one of my heroes has. He's not possessed of an infallible memory, and Sheridan is probably his worst witness against Warren AR, and they will Warren will get his name cleared, or to be restored to the rolls of the Army. He was retired and immediately died. Okay, we gotta go.
All right. The reason we're stopping here is only momentary. Again, for perspective. The Spindle house here went up in flames. Sarah Spindle and her family were here at the time of the battle. They had to evacuate while the place came under fire, and ran in this direction As you can see, it slopes downward, ultimately towards the Po River. And that's where they start sanctuary. But the battle is going to follow them. Because when the battle ceases to be of any use for the Union advance on the Brock Road, it expands into the field by Sarah Spindle's house. When this meets with deadlock against that ridge we left, the fight is going to expand further to the west, towards the Po River. As Griffin's division comes up out of the bottoms here, they know that the Confederates aren't on this ridge, they're on that ridge. But when they come up out of these bottoms, the Confederates, in fact, are on this ridge because they mirror the tree line. And as the line expands to the west, Jeb Stuart has expanded the line forward. To stay on the edge of the tree line, to maintain a field of fire, they're able to fire right down into this draw. So every time the Federals feel that they might have a sense of what the Confederate defense is like, the Confederate defense morphs and changes. And the reality of this battle is that it's all very nebulous. The fog of war is very real, very palpable. That is not Warren's fault. That is just the reality of what is going on here. What is Warren's fault is that he has allowed himself again, even at this late moment, to engage in a piecemeal advance. Where are the skirmishers? They are not here. We are in too much of a hurry to drive into this field. So, there is a number of poorly executed attacks out here. Warren has set the stage. The division and brigade commanders have not distinguished themselves very well today, including my favorite, Charles Griffin. I can't say that his is any bit better than anyone else's. The exception that he has 3 brigades enter this field in relative proximity to each other, which is more than I can say of the others. So, when the king of the war dogs fails, what hope do the others have? So, Laurel Hill has been a series of disjoint disasters, one right after the other. We are reinforcing negative behavior.
And by the 10th, the Confederate position will be much stronger because the Confederates know that the Union are to their front, and their earthworks and their barricades are getting stronger. Now we've got to notice one thing on these battles. They are the Army when the war broke out and West Point indoctrinated. You knew that the greatest soldier of the last 100 years was Bonaparte. Bonaparte, soldiers, his infantry was armed with smooth-bore muskets. His artillery was all smooth-bore, and he could move his artillery and mass it within, as an artillerist, mass it within 800 yards of the enemy. And his infantry could move to within 60 to 80 yards of the enemy before they come into heavy fire. Wolfe at the Battle of Quebec in mid-September 1759 told the British line, double charge your boulevards, your black vests, brown vests, and you're not to fire until the French are within 40 yards. The French will halt at 100 yards. and they will fire several volleys. And the British line stands and takes the volleys. The French partisans in the woods to the left and right are the only ones that don't rush forward. And the French battle line charges forward, and Wolfe's men will wait till they're close to 40 yards. And then the British line will fire double charges of musketry in, and the battle that's going to decide the fate of the Western Hemisphere will be decided in 15 minutes. Be decided in 2 volleys, because the French are going to break and flee. But by now, you're armed with rifle muskets. But they're still practicing Napoleonic tactics. You have lots of rifled artillery. So the lessons that they learn, the lessons they learned in the Mexican War are still valid. When our artillery is supreme, and why we won the Mexican War relatively easily. So the decision to entrench and throw up breastworks comes from the bottom down, not from the top up. At Gettysburg, you use stone walls, but only on little round top, on Gulf's Hill, does one man have the men throw up breastworks, and that is George Sears Green. The rest of the men will use stone walls and things like that. At Chickamauga, you will look in vain for breastworks and entrenchments. This really begins to appear beginning with the Mine Run campaign in the East. And the soldiers know the breastworks, and they'll work hard, because you can get an insurance policy, like I say, from John Hancock. And if you get killed, who collects your money? You don't. But breastworks and barricades save your life and give you the ability to kill the enemy without being killed yourself. So that means that the soldiers will entrench using long-handled shovels, long-handled axes, their mess gear, sharp pieces of wood. And men will work very hard, because that is going to be their life insurance. Sherman says it probably best. In Georgia, it becomes Big Indian War, moving from entrenchment to entrenchment, and casting aspersions at General Thomas, which he should not have done, because Grant despises Thomas. And you don't criticize a fellow that the big man doesn't like in a jovial way. He will write, Grant, he says, when I see the Army of the Cumberland sees a rebel line of breastworks in front of them, it could be only they will halt and entrench. So he then expands, they see a furrow in front of them, they entrench. But that's why they're entrenching, because that's their life saving. And see, even General Sherman isn't very enthused about it, because he's using it for a put down for Thomas. And you're now, the Army of the Potomac is getting initiated to it. Giving troops 12 hours, you're in trouble. Give them 24 hours, and you're in deep doo-doo.
Let's go take a look at that federal line.
Well, we are now we are going to entrench. And we're going to bring up our artillery. We have failed to carry the Confederate defenses of Laurel Hill on the 8th. So we're going to dig a rather well-preserved earthworks still remain here. This would be a battery position. the Union was attacking without artillery support, very little artillery support in their attacks on the 8th. On the evening of the 8th, General Sedgwick will arrive, marching by way of Piney Branch Church Road, and he will take position on General Warren's left, facing generally toward the east, where Warren faces toward the south. And he will also be entrenching. Also arriving on the evening of the 8th by the same way that Anderson had taken. He travels the route that Anderson had, and when he arrives, he will anchor his left on Anderson's right. And as they move into position, again going back to the soldiers, and the soldiers desire to entrench and take and are pretty good eyeball engineers. And as Ewell arrives, his men will take position, anchoring their left on Anderson's right. And what they're going to move out is on high ground. And they're going to establish a position on the watershed separating the Nye River to the north and northeast of us, and the Po River to the south and southeast of us. And in the dark, it's open ground, most of the area. In fact, it's open for over 3/4 of a mile, all the way to the Brown House, way off the property. And they're going to establish their line in the evening, and when they're going to get near the apex, as the drainage of the Nye moves off in that direction, the Confederate line is going to turn and move with the high ground. And when Lee describes it as an engineer, he knows it's a has weaknesses, but he doesn't want to give up that ground. And when General Early arrives, he will put the 3rd Corps in position on the 2nd Corps' right. And they will be positioned to the east of the Spotsylvania Courthouse, overlooking the drainage of the Po. In a good, strong place, particularly since he's facing Burnside's 9th Corps, and if he gets an emergency, he can rush men across on the shortest angle and the best roads to take position behind the Po River, and thus compromise Hancock's plan. So the troops are going to be moving into position and entrenching. Hancock will arrive on the 9th, and he will not rest his left on General Warren, because they're going to have between them and Warren the Po River. And he will throw cotton bridges across the Po and cross the Po River, and will be separated from Warren by the Po River. And that's where he'll be on the 9th, except for that one division that he has sent over on the extreme left of the 6th Corps, Brother Mott, who will become a problem this afternoon. So the two forces are entrenching. Each hour the position becomes stronger, and it gives you an idea of the well-preserved Union trenches that we're along and behind. And I will turn it over to my colleague, and then we'll go up to the point where Warren left ties into General Sedgwick's right, and where General Sedgwick will meet his end when we make our last stop before we get aboard the bus.
All right, let's march.
We're with Morris's brigade and a section of artillery This is a point where Sedgwick's 6th Corps, generally facing in that direction, forms an angle with Warren's Corps, which faces generally south. Sedgwick is from Connecticut. He had been a soldier a long time. He had been a major in the elite 1st U.S. Cavalry, established in 1855, in which he would have known Jeb Stuart well. Personality-wise, do we have any maiden ladies? He's available, because he's a bachelor. He's a solitaire player, and in politics, he's different than any of the other people that speak their piece. He is not a Republican. He is a Democrat, Cornwall, Connecticut. More important, he is the last McClellan loyalist in the Union Army. He would be using as a World War II simile. He would be a person that's a soldier's soldier, like Omar Bradley, popular with his men. His brigade has not been dinked with during the reorganization of the winter of February 1864. It's still a three division corps. So up there now, also, it's going to be good for you if you want to give your version to the story. Be like John Brown Gordon, who is not going to die until well into the 1890s. Be like Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, who will not die till February 1914. Be like Barry Benson, who is one of the claimants for shooting General Sedgwick. He doesn't die till the 1920s. So if you live a long time, you can get your story out, and hopefully too many of your comrades won't be around to identify you as a BS artist. So the Confederates are going to be on the high ground to our front, just near where you can see the Y in the road. And that is where Barry Benson may be, and also where a number of other Confederates may be. And when Frank, I don't know if Frank was here, when I came here, there used to be a filling station up there in that Y. And when the filling station disappeared, they left the gas pump there. The gas pump was one of these gravity ones. Was it here when you arrived?
It was here.
Where you used to be able, where you pumped the gas, and you could say, in that area, Barry Benson or one of the other claimants for shooting General Sedgwick will be posted. So General Sedgwick is down here. He's with his chief of staff, Martin Mahan, and some of the other staff officers. And we're in an artillery position here where we're standing. And they're under fire at a range of about 500 yards. And as they're being fired on, a soldier will scurry through the area, and he throws himself to the ground. General Sedgwick knows it. Now, he's not going to be a sadist. He's not going to come over and kick the bell. He's going to tap it. And the soldier will get up and scamper off. And Sedgwick will reputedly, according to Martin Mahan in his article, will make his last words. They cannot, at that range, hit an elephant. And as he's standing here, there will be a spat, And as the painting is going to show you, as he lies there, just to the left of the upper part where your left eye is, a bullet will hit him, and he will go to the ground, and he is dead. This is a wonderful painting that I've always loved to be here. It was painted here shortly after Robert Crick, a good friend of mine, and a mentor of Frank O'Reilly. In fact, one of Bob has two great legacies. Training people like this, and pushing preservation of land. So he will have that painting there. He has Sidney paint in two of the people you may know. Many of you know Chris Calkins, who used to live right near where the pump was. And Chris does living history. And he's an officer in the 7th Michigan. And Chris, being a typical unionist in a country where there are many good Southern civilians, Chris is very expert at stealing silverware. And look at his knapsack. You're going to see some silverware sticking out of that. And then you people know Will Green. This is Will Green when he had some hair. Will has the same amount of hair as myself. And Bob will soon have it. And there is Will back there with a rifle. So I think these are wonderful paintings that grab people to come to this area. Now, worse is Sedgwick is an infantryman / cavalryman. Now, if you're not in the infantry and the cavalry, you're going to say the Engineer Corps controls the Army of the Potomac. Because the man to replace General Sedgwick will be the commander, Senior Division Commander Horatio Gouverneur Wright. And he is an engineer, married to a lady from Culpeper County, turned his back on his wife and his wife's people, remained loyal to the Union, and he is not going to react well. He is not a man that abstains from drink. And in a few days after he takes command with his responsibility, he will not be a really effective war commander. And we're going to hear that all the big decisions in the Upton attack, he is not going to be even mentioned in the planning process. Sedgwick will be taken back to Cromwell near Torrington, Connecticut, where you can go visit him. He's buried with a large number of his relatives. Can't be buried with any wife. Can't be buried with any children. Unlike Jubal Anderson Early, who never marries a woman, he can be buried with his children if they so desire. Because I don't want to explain to these good ladies, like Marty Jane and Gail Stevens, that how does a guy have children? One family from the black woman and 4 children from the white woman that never married. Like courtesy of Sedgwick's politics and his relationships with the administration and McClellan, is thanks to my
Let's eat! Mount up!
I want you to come up with a plan in which we will use all of our corps. And I want this attack set for a time when all corps can attack at the same time, which will end up being 5 p.m. As you look on your map, you can see General Burnside. Burnside is going to advance down what is Courthouse Road, then the Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania Turnpike, and crush the Confederate right and seize the village of Spotsylvania Courthouse. 6th Corps under General Wright will attack in the area where we are now. Wright will be more or less out of it. And we'll go into his plan, which is not made by him. His plan is made by his Chief of Staff, Martin Mahan, David Russell, and his Chief Engineer. And they will make the plan, and Upton isn't going to learn that he's going to command the attack until the last minute. General Warren and General Hancock being the senior, will attack Laurel Hill. All attacks are to commence at 5 o'clock and be coordinated. Warren will get up that day. He is planning a coup. He's planning to gain prestige, and if not, being dressed in his best uniform, he'll be properly attired to be buried. The Confederates will be, as we're going to, Frank will soon take over, there's going to be one thing that they have to accomplish before they can attack. 3 of Hancock's 4 divisions are south of the Nye River and west of the Nye River. So that means that Hancock is going to have to extricate those men across the Nye River and bring them up and position them on Laurel Hill, and then he will attack with Warren's 5th Corps and his 2nd Corps. Hancock has more or less forgot about General Mott of his division, who is positioned on the left of the 6th Corps. Things will not be all they seem, because Warren is going to do what he ain't supposed to do. He is going to co-opt, because Hancock is having a lot of trouble recrossing the Nye River, because General Jubal Early is angry, and he's attacking the Federals as they fall back to the Nye, and Warren and Hancock has to go over there and extricate those 3 divisions from their embarrassing situation and put them into position to spirit the attack on the Laurel Hill. But he's going to get a hard time. The Confederates are angry. They don't like those guys in the 2nd Corps. The 2nd Corps is elitist, and they have not lost a cannon since Robert E. Lee has taken command of the Army of Northern Virginia, which will be on the 1st day of June, 1860. But they're going to have a hard time getting across. And the Confederates are going to give a cheer, because they're going to capture 2 cannons of the 2nd Corps as they try to cross the Nye River. But Warren in his dress uniform decides, I'm not going to wait for 5 o'clock. Because I will not be if we break the line, I want me to do it. I do not want Hancock to command here. So he will attack at 4 o'clock and be repulsed. So that means by the time Hancock has extricated his men, the Union will have to postpone their attack to 6 o'clock. But nobody tells Mott, because Mott is in position on the left of Wright. So that means that the attack has now been set back for the 6 o'clock, and General Mott doesn't know it. So he is going to attack at 5 o'clock. And he has to advance 3/4 of a mile across open ground. And Carter's artillery from the mule shoe will tear them apart before they get over 300 yards. And Mott is orders combat for the rest of the day and until the 12th day of May. Now, since we know what the Union planned, we know they're having a tough time getting everything coordinated. We know that Warren has attacked at 4 o'clock, been repulsed, and is now going to attack under the supervision of General Hancock at 6 o'clock. We've got to know what the Confederates are doing, and what's better than to bring Robert E. Lee up here to join me here. General Lee. Now, if I wasn't with my good friend Frank O'Reilly, I would put somebody like Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Gibbs, Robert E. Lee.
One of the unique aspects of the battle at Spotsylvania is that most battles are determined by some feature of the landscape that had preceded the armies. A particular road network, an intersection, a hill, a ridge. Spotsylvania is going to be unique in that it is going to be largely determined from here on out by a feature introduced by the soldier. And that is the nature and size of the Confederate line. It's going to create a tremendous bowl that juts out towards the northeast. On your maps, like on map number 19, you can see Ewell is in the very tip of that thing that is known in military terms as a salient. The Confederates have a much more homey term for it. They call it the mule shoe, because it looks like something you can shod a horse or a mule with. That ultimately is going to be the focus of intense action. But the question is, why do they not attack the tip of the mule shoe until May 12th, 4 days after they have arrived here? And the other question is, why is there a mule shoe at all? First question, why they do not attack it for 4 days, we have Phil Sheridan and Ulysses S. Grant to thank. Because Sheridan has been removed with his cavalry to go on a deep sweeping raid to whip Stewart. And he is heading for Yellow Tavern, ultimately. There are 3 divisions of cavalry in the Union Army. Phil Sheridan took all 3 of them. So the Union Army is functioning blindly. That's why we see some bizarre behavior out here. They don't attack the natural weakness of the Confederate line. They attack its strength. The Second Corps crossed the Po River to get into the Confederate rear. But as you look at map number 19, you will see where Hancock is located on the Po River from the north bank, crossing to the south bank. He is going to move where you see the words Heath and Mahone. And what he will discover is that he is in an elbow of the Po River. To cross it means you have to cross it twice to get at the Confederates. Why would anybody commit themselves to such isolation? It is because they do not know the ground, and they do not have the cavalry to scout it. We love to fault Joe Hooker for sending all his cavalry away at Chancellorsville and allowing Stonewall Jackson to work his will on it. But Hooker had no precedent. Grant does. He has Hooker. We are going to make the exact same mistake almost a year to the day and send the cavalry away. Now, Sheridan, being our so-called cavalry leader, should know what the primary function of cavalry is: intelligence and screening. But all he knows is combat and raiding. And Grant lets him do it. So the Army is going to flail blindly. Now, why is there a mule shoe? What great advantage do we have of this thing? If we think about Spotsylvania like the wilderness, we will think of it as two different battles that merge together. We had a battle that we spent the entire morning out on the Brock Road, blocking the road to Spotsylvania. We had Harry Wilson come in behind the Confederates and threaten the courthouse. The 9th Corps is eventually going to be coming along that exact same axis. So there will be a second threat, a second front. And the Confederates are going to form up a line perpendicular to the courthouse road. They will form up a line perpendicular to the Brock Road. And as they extend their flanks, they will extend towards each other and form a tip on the mule shoe. So we have two straight lines that come together to form this unseemly angle. The benefit of keeping it is that it keeps the Federals physically as far away from the intersection as possible, away from the line of communications. For the Confederates, all their supplies are going to come through that intersection and feed into the Confederate lines. If they flatten out the line, the next defensible piece of ground is almost a mile behind the tip of that mule shoe. It will flatten out almost exactly parallel and along the lines of the Brock Road. It would be almost impossible to do much for Spotsylvania Courthouse if it is under constant and direct fire from many fronts. So they hold on to it. This is something that was born of the necessity of a battle that was fluid. They dug in, and then they tried to make it an all-encompassing defense. Now the Federals are going to spend 4 days testing it, looking for its weakness, looking for something to exploit, and they're looking in the wrong direction. Their assaults over May 8th, May 9th, and into May 10th are disasters. They haven't even been able to get to the Confederate lines, much less penetrate them. Robert E. Lee's men have done a fine job. But they're going to make one mistake. They're going to put pickets out in front of their lines, and directly in front of the 6th Corps, not half a mile away from you. Their pickets are going to withdraw on the morning of May 10th before their replacements are at hand. The 6th Corps is going to see this and quickly grab their picket line, so the Confederates could not occupy it. That allows the Federals to get much closer and observe much more of the Confederate defense than they had before, and that breeds opportunity. As Ed has told us, the 6th Corps now will become a paramount player. This is the place where they can assert themselves, and a young, brash, 24-year-old upstart colonel from New York, Emery Upton, is going to teach the lieutenant general and the bevy of major generals how to attack earthworks. May 10th isn't done yet. There's a lot of disasters, but there is one hope.
All right. Now, the 6th Corps have had a god of some luck in attacking enemy strongholds. They had knew that at Fredericksburg, that wonderful book that no one understood, and I include myself among them, the Battle of Fredericksburg, till that masterful book written by Frank O'Reilly. And that is the last attack the Union makes that day by Humphrey's division, by Tyler's brigade, will be given orders to advance. They will advance in regimental column. The men will not load their weapons, they will not cap their weapons, and they're told not to halt and fire. And as they go forward, just as dusk is closing in, they don't reach the Confederate line, but they get very close to it and are repulsed. The Sixth Corps itself, on the third day of May, will attack Marye's Heights, and they will. Upton will be there. David Russell will be there, and they will advance out of Fredericksburg in column. Again, they have been told, cap your pieces, but don't fire. Keep going, even when the head of the column melts away, as they're cut down, and use the bayonet and club musket. Now the Confederates are holding the Willis Hill line with elements of Barksdale's brigade of Mississippians. Instead of having a battalion of artillery, they have 8 guns. It's going to cost the Sixth Corps heavily, but they are going to break the line. They learned you can attack on a narrow front and great depth. Do not halt and fire. Take your losses, and you have stormed Marye's Heights. Better yet, at near Remington, late on the afternoon of a cold November 7th, Russell's brigade will spirit attack made on a narrow front, break the Confederate line, and capture a good part of Harry Hayes's brigade of Louisianans that will say, BS, the Texans aren't the meanest guys in the army. We can do better with the women, and we can outfight them in the bar. And over 1,200 of them will be captured, along with 6 flags and 6 guns, along with a number of North Carolinians. So they have had success. So when the attack comes up, Wright is out of it. He will not be involved in the planning. The planning will be by David Russell. Russell had been instrumental at Marye's Heights back on the 3rd day of May of '63. He had spearheaded the attack at across the Rappahannock and crumbling the Confederate bridgehead or Tete de Paul at Remington. So he comes up. He's talking to the chief of staff, Mahan, representing General Wright. And they say, we need a place to attack the Confederate line. Now, we need our chief engineer. And we have the chief engineer of the 6th Corps was number uno in the class of 1862, and it is Randall Mackenzie. If his father hadn't changed his name, it would be Randall Slade. A name for the senator is related to the senator from Louisiana. And he will go out to reconnoiter. Now he's going to look for a place in the Confederate line where it bulges out, where the Confederate line is concave. He's going to look for this place where the Confederate picket line has been withdrawn. Not close to the woods, and where the edge of the woods, thanks to Bob Crick, now has the same alignment as it did then, within about 150 yards of the Confederate line. He also wants to find a place where the Confederate artillery is dispersed to the left and right. And he goes out and he's found the place. It's Dole Sayed. The Confederate line bulges out there. Why does he want it? The Confederate line bulges out. That means those Georgia boys can't concentrate their artillery fire on this very narrow front. And we're going to attack on a very narrow front. And that artillery is widely dispersed. The woods are close, and last but not least, we have a road that you could not, when you were here back before the 1980s, you could not do what we were going to do. Because we're going to emulate them. So they now have is to place a substantial force. And we're going to place 3, 3, 3. And we're to move into position without making any noise. And when 6 o'clock, originally 5 o'clock comes, but now 6 o'clock, we will go forward. But now they have to find a commander. Russell is now a division commander, and they have met and decided the best young fellow, 24 years old, is Emory Upton. And the first he knows, the plan is in place. They're already picking the men. Russell has already entered, taken a position. My brigade that I used to command are the best in the Corps. So it's going to come down, they've got to use most of Russell's old brigade. And they're going to use Upton, but Upton is going to make one change. He's going to say, I want my 3 regiments to be in front. My regiment, the 121st New York, will be on the right. A regiment who I'm familiar with, since they were my brigade. The 96th Pennsylvania will be in the center. And on the left will be the 5th Maine. So the second wave will be Russell. And then the last people will be, and they'll each have a specific measurement, know what they're going to do. They have been taken into the confidence. The last 3 regiments are drawn for the Vermont Brigade. And they're going to draw the 2nd, 5th, and 6th. The 1st brigade and the 2 first brigades of 3 regiments each are not going to count to pieces. They're going to be told when we go forward, we are not going to halt the fire. Just like at Marie's Heights, back on the 3rd of May, just light at Remington on the 7th day of November. We will go over the rebel works, and we will use the bayonet and the club musket. When we go over the works, our colonel of the 121st New York and the colonel of the 96th Pennsylvania will immediately swing right, rolling up the Confederate line southward. 5th Maine will go to the left. The 2nd 3 go over, also with their muskets uncapped, will go straight forward in case the Confederates have a second line. The Vermonters will stay back here on the edge of the woods. They are the reserve. Now, we don't know, because Mott's attack was so easily repulsed by artillery fire, we don't know that Mott had attacked back at 5 o'clock when he heard Warren's guns that opened Warren's attack at 4 o'clock. And Mott is not going to participate because his men had been swept away by shell and canister. So that means they don't know that's going to happen. So, and Upton will go forward. Frank will have to get used to riding a horse. And when they're going forward, they will chant. And they will chant as they go forward at a trot, and they will be chanting forward, forward, forward. So we can see they're going to, because of reconnaissance, they're going to attack on a narrow front. Everybody knows what they're going to do. The thing they can't control is Upton, or what Warren had done by attacking at 4 o'clock and having the attack set back to 6 o'clock. So that's the formation, and Frank might want to say some words what the Confederates are doing at this time.
Actually, I'm going to reserve that till when we get into the Confederate line.
All right, he's going to join us in the Confederate line.